Good afternoon, everyone. Kuzazampola. Warm greetings. My name is Claudine Triolo, and I am the Regional Director of Sales and Marketing for Six Senses Bhutan. It's a pleasure to be with you here, even if we are just connected virtually, but to be speaking to all of you about a topic that is very interesting, I think very relevant and dear to my heart, and that is sustaining culture. Travel can be so many different things to so many different people, but I think since COVID and since we've all been forced in one way or another to stop what we normally do and to rethink things, not only in terms of traveling, but in our own lives. We've had some time to really reflect and ask some important questions like, what is the purpose of travel? Why do we travel? What were we getting right, and what do we need to change, and how might we do it differently going forward? So these are big topic questions, but I think they are the questions that a lot of us have had on our mind, particularly those of us in the travel business. But I've been asking myself this question a lot because on a personal level, I love to travel. Travel can be such a transformative experience and so meaningful and such a connector of people and cultures. And there are other times where travel can actually run the risk of damaging cultures, of being too much, of hurting our environment. Our natural resources sometimes can be stretched too far. We've all thought about, the effect of mass tourism and, the kind of effects that bringing too many people to culturally fragile sites, whether they're archaeological sites, historical sites, or even villages or towns where they're not really ready perhaps to absorb so many people, or where the lure of quick money for fast development in travel could have a damaging effect. So this is actually a perfect time for us to sit back and think about maybe going forward how we can adjust, or what might be different, or how we in the travel industry can create more meaningful experiences for people to travel with what I would call more conscious traveling. I am going to get to Bhutan in just a moment, but I'm also going to give it a little bit of a personal story that I'm old enough to think back to a time pre-smartphones and even pre-computer when I had my first travel experiences. And that they were, as an American growing up in New York, going to Europe for the first time was very, very exciting for me as a teenager. And I remember taking it all in, and how excited I was to see every monument and to learn about it and to memorize it and to absorb it, and how different and new it was. And a lot of that excitement, a lot of that novelty in travel is something that's getting, I think, harder and harder to come by as we globalize, as we travel more, as communication lines open up and everything becomes instant. And a lot of things that were very special maybe have gotten taken for granted in a way, because we've gone so fast, so far when it comes to travel, and almost, perhaps, I don't know about you, but me, sometimes before I might even be finished with one trip, I'm already thinking about the next. So as much as I love to travel, for me personally, I've thought, okay, the COVID's got me grounded here in Bangkok, which is my home base, which I actually really enjoy. It's forced me to slow down and reflect about my own life, about the speed of it, about the things that I might do differently coming out of it, and also about travel. I've thought to myself, maybe I don't want to travel, maybe I don't need to travel as much or as often, but when I do, I want to do it with more purpose. I want to take more time beforehand to prepare myself for it, to get excited about it, to learn about it, and to go there and make real connections, while I make a better effort to disconnect with all the things that are at home, and to have a really meaningful travel experience. So this brings me now to the topic of Bhutan, which is a delight for me always to talk about. And if any of you have ever been there, you'll know what I mean. It is a very, very special destination. And what I think is so amazing about Bhutan and so timely is that it's this tiny little Himalayan landlocked kingdom with a population of, I think, around 1 million people. But it has developed such a forward-looking approach to tourism, or I would call it an advanced approach to tourism. A lot of people maybe would consider it an undeveloped country, or even perhaps a poor country, economically speaking. But I actually find it to be quite a rich country, particularly in terms of its culture and in the way it has developed very consciously, very thoughtfully. It's how it wants to develop tourism, rather than just opening up the floodgates and letting everybody come in and dictate to them what tourism is going to be, and having a very, what I would call, a kind of short-sighted approach, driven by perhaps greed or the desire to develop quickly and catch up. They've always, from the very beginning, when they first opened their doors to tourists, they've always said, we want to have what we call a high-value, low-impact approach to tourism. And I think that this has served them very, very well. So basically, by having every visitor to the kingdom pay a daily fee, which is called the sustainability fee, which goes to help the local economy, the government, and also to help preserve the natural resources of the kingdom. The numbers are automatically reduced, plus the kind of tourism that develops in Bhutan then develops along the lines of cultural tourism, environmentally friendly tourism, what I would call quality over quantity. And I think personally that is a model that more and more countries should strive for. Of course, travel is something that can benefit everyone who has the opportunity to do it. It's one of the best ways for us to learn, I think, as human beings. And yet, cultures and natural resources do have a limit in terms of how much they can sustain before they're damaged beyond repair. And I think we all need to be more conscious of that. So my personal feeling is that travel shouldn't be easy. It should cost something, whether that cost is with a sort of a price tag on it, or means maybe you have to make an extra effort to do it or to get there. And I think when it comes to countries where the culture is fragile, as so many cultures are these days, because everything is changing so fast and moving ahead so fast in the world, that a lot of traditions have fallen by the wayside in a very, very short period of time. I've been living in Asia now for 30 years, so I've seen a lot of changes in this short time. And while I understand very well that things will change, and this is part of Buddhist culture as well, everything is always changing. So we can't just hold to the past, but I think we can develop thoughtfully and make conscious choices of the kind of changes that we actually want. And that's why I think Bhutan is such an interesting model, because I don't want to project it or pretend that it's a perfect place or it's Shangri-La. Of course, they have their own issues and their own challenges there. But I think through very, very sound leadership, through the very sound leadership of the royal family and good governance, and a culture that is really permeated by Buddhist values. They have been able to create a very, very unique model of tourism, which is based very much around preservation and sustaining their culture. And for this, I have a deep admiration. Again, on a personal level, I can't explain why. Maybe it's serendipity. When I moved to Asia, it's coming up on 30 years now. One of the first trips I ever made was up to the Himalayas, and I went to Nepal and to Bhutan during that trip. So I got to visit Bhutan in 1995, and it just left such an impact on me. I think that when we travel, we are looking for something different. We are looking to have our eyes and our hearts opened, and to learn about other people and other places and things that are different from home. And Bhutan was that for me. It was so different, and it was at that time even more inaccessible and remote than it is these days. And it left its mark on me. The tranquility, the serenity, the peace, the natural beauty, and the way, really the people, I think, the way that they were Buddhist, and how the kindness and gentleness, but also a real kind of earthy sense of humor and fun just permeated their everyday lives. And I think also their sense of openness and hospitality and the warm welcome and the care that I got when I was there. It made a real impact on me. I've traveled to many places, but I can say that was one that stood out. So that's why all these years later, to come back now and to be able to represent the destination, and of course Six Senses there, which opened this past year, is just a blessing really for me. And I think while we're all really challenged during this difficult time of COVID, I feel that Bhutan will come out of it in a very strong position. Of course, again, it's a niche market, it's a high-end market. I should also mention that the only way in and the only way out is to fly in on a national carrier. So that's another thing. There's no budget airlines flying through. And I should also mention to all of you, because a lot of you are travel agents, that you can't book Bhutan online. You need to actually work with a travel agency or with a hotel like Six Senses that can arrange all the things for you that you need for your clients to come into the kingdom, like the visas, like the sustainable fees. And another thing to mention is that Bhutan doesn't allow travelers just to arrive and go off on their own and rent their own vehicles and go and explore wherever they'd like to. It's not restrictive, but what they do is they put everything together for the traveler in terms of a package. And there's a guide, a Bhutanese guide, that's with the guest, with the traveler, from the moment they arrive to the moment they leave. And this also is really something very special, because it means that it allows a very close connection to someone from the local culture, a great opportunity to build a relationship with someone local, to ask all sorts of questions, very often to be welcomed into the guide's home or into their village sometimes, or introduced to friends. And you get all sorts of insights by being so close to someone who is local that you might not get if you just went to a country with some friends and did a day tour somewhere, but otherwise went out on your own. And I love that part of the Bhutanese travel experience as well. You can make real connections there and really learn about the place through local eyes. And I think that's very important. And since I'm talking today about sustainable culture, this is something that I think also aids in that. What is it that we want to get from that travel experience? It's that connection, it's the insight, it's the learning, it's the good feelings, it's those shared moments. And I think that the way the Bhutanese have structured their tourism experience encourages that. While I don't think any of us know exactly what travel will look like a year from now, or in the future when we come out of COVID, I think that we'd all probably agree that there will be changes and that people will approach travel differently and think about it differently, and that this is an opportunity. And I feel like Bhutan will be, if it wasn't already at the top of a lot of travelers' bucket lists of once in a lifetime places to visit, I think it will be more and more a country that is featured, that is suggested as a destination that would be perfect for visiting coming out of COVID. For a lot of the reasons I've already mentioned, the small population, the fact that they are not a mass tourist destination, so you won't be surrounded by crowds visiting sites. You have a lot of serenity there. You have a lot of natural resources. Bhutan is one of the only countries I know that has actually mandated that a certain amount of its land must and will always remain virgin forest cover. And I couldn't talk about Bhutan without talking about GNH, and this is something which I guess many of you have heard about, gross national happiness. It's a very catchy phrase which actually describes something which is closer to a philosophy or approach of living. It doesn't mean that everybody is happy every day all the time in Bhutan, but what it means is that they have decided to look at how they gauge success, or how they gauge a meaningful life. So many of us these days measure our success, so many countries measure their success by GDP, development, how much money you make. All of these things, this is kind of what we've tied our wagon to in the West in terms of measuring whether we're successful or not. And due to the very forward-thinking leadership of the royal family and the kings of Bhutan, they've said, hold on a minute, maybe that's not all that. Maybe there are other things that are more important than just development for the sake of development. And they laid out a whole, I wouldn't say a treatise or doctrine, which covers this philosophy of gross national happiness and what it actually means. And it has to do with, basically being able to be with one's family, having a good education, having access to health care, a good, clean, natural environment, spirituality. In other words, a well-rounded life. And I think that's the thing, that when you go as a visitor to Bhutan, you leave there feeling very, very touched, because it makes you ask yourself these kind of questions like, what is really important in life? What are my values? Do I have it right? Should I reconsider maybe the way I approach this? And I think that that's really important, and that's probably one of the greatest gifts that a travel experience can give you. I should spend a few minutes at least talking about Bhutan as a travel destination. As you can imagine, being up in the Himalayas, it's got amazing mountains, but it's also got beautiful, beautiful green valleys. And as you move from valley to valley, you don't go to Bhutan sort of for a 2-day trip. You shouldn't anyway. You should spend, I think, at least a week there exploring it. But the point is that each valley has its own unique characteristics. Each valley has its own unique culture, its own monuments and monasteries, and even from valley to valley, the food can be different. So going to Bhutan should be a journey which takes you through a series of valleys, and which allows you to touch the different parts of their culture and history and experience the different character of each place. And I also should mention Six Senses Bhutan, since these are the lodges that I represent, that we have built 5 lodges in the 5 main valleys of Bhutan, where most visitors go, starting in Paro and then going to Thimphu and then to Punakha, Gang Tae, and finally to Bhutan in the east. And so having our lodges there allows one to travel from valley to valley with the same guide, with the same sort of experience, and to touch all the valleys, and ideally to have the full experience. I think Six Senses as a brand has always been very, very focused on sustainability and wellness. And that's why it's such a perfect fit for Bhutan, because it just, the philosophy of the brand and the philosophy of the kingdom and its approach to tourism have really great synergy. And so the sustainability initiatives of Six Senses, when you go there, are organic farms, the various programs that we have put in place to give back to the communities where we are based, really give the visitor an opportunity to touch the culture in a very authentic way, but leaving a very, very, how can I say, soft footprint on the destination. And the other thing that I personally love about the lodges there is the fact that not only are they beautiful, but each is different. And that's another kind of sensitivity to the destination, I think. The fact that the architects and the designers and the masterminds behind these beautiful lodges really put so much thought, they were years in the making, into developing lodges that would be respectful of the local environment and of the culture where they were, and also reflect the particular characteristics of the valley where they're located. And I can give you examples. For example, in Thimphu, which is the royal capital, our beautiful lodge is located up on the top of the side of a mountain with amazing views over the capital below, with a perfect view onto the Buddha Dodema, which is one of the tallest seated Buddha images in the world, and the views from everywhere in the lodge look straight out in that direction. And because it's the seat of the royal capital, and it's up very, very high, we call it our palace in the sky, and it's got floor-to-ceiling windows and reflecting ponds and a prayer pavilion, and it's very serene and amazing, and yet it has this refined elegance about it. Whereas when you get to Punakha, which is a low-lying agricultural valley in Bhutan, it's sort of the rice bowl of Bhutan. There the lodges take on a much more rustic, chic kind of feel, and they were inspired by the farmhouse architecture of Bhutan. And as you go through, each of the valleys and each of the lodges are there to connect the visitor to the place where they are. When a hotel is at its best, or when a resort is at its best, it's actually a portal to the destination. It actually enhances the experience and gives an even broader view or a deeper view and meaning to the traveler's experience there. And that's what we've set out to do at Six Senses Bhutan, and I think that's what we are doing, and I'm very, very proud of that. And I can say that we're all of us, I'm speaking on behalf of the team at Six Senses Bhutan, we're all very, very much looking forward to welcoming you there if you haven't been to Bhutan, or to welcoming you back if you have a chance, and of course to welcoming your visitors. I believe that they will have the trip of a lifetime when they come, and they will have a meaningful experience and really touch that theme of sustainable culture and sustainable tourism, which I think is going to be really something important for all of us going forward. Thank you very much, and I hope to have the chance to meet some of you in person very soon. Kadinchila.